Good evening, and welcome to the listeners of WAZL. This is State Representative Todd Eachus, and we're here at the Hazle Commons Center, where Hazle Township holds their public meetings. For a meeting this evening of residents of Hazleton, West Hazleton, and Hazle Township. I'm honored to be here. We've got a good room full of folks who we're going to have a conversation about the state budget, local issues, and make sure that people's comments are recorded so that I understand what your concerns are about what's happening in the community and at the state level. I want to thank you all for coming. Part of the reason why I think it's important to come back and do these town meetings, I've been doing them for some years, is to be able to understand what the pulse of the community is as it relates to the work that's going on in Harrisburg, and trying to make sure that the things that I'm representing on your behalf are things that you're concerned about as well. Let me start off by saying that this has been a very difficult budget year. You all know it. You watched closely on TV. My new role as majority leader put me in a more forward position than I have been in current years. But I also think it was an opportunity to express things that I've been concerned about for a lot of years in the state budget. The things that were concerning are always things that I fought for: children's health insurance, health access for seniors, education, property taxes, things you'd expect me to fight for, things that I've stood for in this community. But it was really what created the depth of the problem was the national economic crisis that America faces. Pennsylvania was not immune from the problems that Wall Street faced and that the United States faced. We ended up with the worst economic downturn in Pennsylvania since 1929. So no legislature in history had a $3.3 billion shortfall. That shortfall started out with the governor's budget address and made it very clear that we were going to have to do some significant change as it relates to state government. And we began to do that. The human services programs in our counties, whether they're mental retardation programs at Whitehaven Center or drug and alcohol programs in our community, vital services within the transportation network in Pennsylvania. So these were the kinds of decisions we had to make, and they weren't easy. You watched it. These were extremely difficult to rectify. And I can tell you this, that I think what we came up with was a measured product. Even after all the wrangling, the Senate, the first Senate bill, and I'll refer to it a number of times, Senate Bill 850, which came from the Senate. That bill started at $27 billion. Our legislation in the House started out at $29 billion, and guess what? A fifth grader could figure it out. We ended up at $28 billion for the final state budget. That final state spending plan ended up being less than, including all the federal stimulus money we got. So it's not only state tax dollars and state spending, but also federal stimulus dollars. It ended up below 2008-2009 levels. So the misconception that somehow we spent more and taxed is not accurate. So we cut and we added additional revenue, but we did cut. And we kept the spending plan below 2008 levels. In certain areas, we had a fundamental disagreement. Of public education. I have a graph here, which unfortunately the listeners at WAZ won't be able to see, but this is one of the kind of the fundamental arguments that were really concerning to me as your representative and for many of us. You'll see here that what this red diamond pie is federal dollars that came from Washington. Those dollars last for 2 years. They end in 2011 and 2012. What this line represents, the blue line here, for this budget year, 2009-10, is what Senate Bill 850 in the Republican plan in the Senate wanted to cut out of state subsidy. They wanted to fill the gap in with federal money from Washington temporarily. The problem is that as you look at the 2005-2006 funding level, it would have taken us backward in state funding to 2005-06, which means that when you get to the end of the federal stimulus money, you have a huge graph to get back to 2009, 2010 levels. If you look at the next graph, this is actually what passed which is part of the reason why what I fought hard about, is that, once again, you have 2008 and 2009 funding level for public education. That's state dollars, your tax dollars from the state that go to public education, and an application of federal dollars that ends up filling in that wedge. But we maintained the funding level in 2009-10 at 2008-9 levels. We didn't increase public education spending. We didn't raise taxes to get there. We maintained effort so that when we get to the end of the federal stimulus money, that there's not this huge funding cliff. The funding cliff, the argument that I made in the public conference committee, which was a difficult experience, but it was, it was one of those things you had to make. The argument that we made was, if you don't fund public education at that level, you're going to end up with two things that could happen. One, another tax increase from the Commonwealth to make up that 2005-2006 level back up to 2009-10, or we're going to have to pass on school property taxes, neither of which, frankly, I was willing to put up with. So I fought hard. I argued in public about it. It wasn't the kindest and gentlest moment, but it made, I want you to understand that it made graphic sense. If you look at the Hazle Area School District's funding for this year, you end up in a situation that, if you look at, this actually refers to Senate Bill 850. This is how it would have looked at the local level. So, once again, the effort would have been cut to 2005-2006 levels. Public school funding would have seen a funding cliff at the end of 2 years. That wedge is federal money again. So what ended up passing was, once again, we maintained the effort from last year, from 2008-2009 spending. We guarantee it that that's the same amount, and we apply the federal stimulus money on top. Now, in our case, in the Hazle Area School District, we have seen growth. That growth means that we now have the highest subsidy in Luzerne County. The Hazle Area School District got the highest public school subsidy of any school district in our county. You got the next board there. The other kinds of things that we were in, so public schools was a major issue that really kind of framed the differences in how we philosophically looked at this. Cut our way out of it, back to 2005, 2006, or maintain the effort. Here again, you got school improvement grants, which go directly into the public schools. Senate Bill 850 cut it to $22 million. We ended up in final budget negotiations fighting for a $33 million. Public library funding. Jim's funding for the public, Jim Reimuller's funding for the public library system in Senate Bill 850 was $37 million, which represented a 51% cut over 2008-2009 funding levels. Jim told me, frankly, that he would have to dismantle the public library system in Hazelton, shut down areas, should maybe even turn off computer systems, which were vital to people's literacy opportunities and to people who don't have computers to use them. We ended up with a 23% cut at $60 million, which was still significant, all right? But like I said to you, everybody's boat floated down. Everybody took a cut in this budget. Almost every single program in state government took a cut. But we had to cut that $2.3 billion that I talked about out of that $3.3 billion wedge that we had. Science is elementary, kind of a fundamental issue in our public schools. Senate Bill 850 cut it to zero. We put in $13.6 million in the final package.